Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. And today I got a review for you guys of the Hogue Doug Ritter RSK MK1 G2. Now that is an absolute mouthful, but this knife is incredible, you guys. You know, don't just look at the name. We're probably gonna just end up calling this the Doug Ritter for the rest of the video. But this is a great knife. It is a KnifeWorks exclusive, and as you guys can see, I have the version in the JG10. But if you guys are regular viewers of my channel, or if you've seen the Griptilian video, you might recognize this intro, i.e. the scale laying on top of the knife. Why is that a thing? Well, custom scales. Custom scales, of course. I love JG10. I have quite a number of knives in JG10, but I bought this knife specifically for the sole purpose of customizing it, because I've been told that these are some of the absolute greatest OG GOAT scales you can get. I don't want to get too deep into it, especially because we're reviewing the knife and not the scales, but I might speak on the scales just a smidge, but that's beside the point. Moving forward, yes, the review today is of the Doug Ritter RSK MK1 G2 in 20 CV and G10. This knife is incredible, and it is quite big, so I want to give you guys some pretty good size comparisons. Now, I have a couple knives kind of in this Griptilian-esque format, including the Griptilian itself. You guys can see these two have quite a bit of similarity, including the fact that Doug Ritter's actually worked with Benchmade and made blades for the Griptilian, I believe, under the Benchmade umbrella. So that is pretty nifty. I also have the Mini Adamas. I kind of consider the Mini Adamas to be in the Griptilian adjacent family. I think it's like a cousin, something like that. Just the contoured handles, the crossbar style lock, etc. I find a lot of similarities between these three. But not only in these three, but also in a fellow Hogue, I'll put him under the Hogue, the H&K Exemplar. Again, following the same format of a crossbar style lock with heavily contoured handles and a thumb stud action. As you guys can see, the Doug Ritter is actually bigger than all of them. It is the kind of cold steel of the Griptilian bloodline. Just in it that it's huge. You know what I mean? Just in it that it's huge. But it's a pretty solid and pretty fairly big knife. I think the best size comparison, though, to kind of show you guys this is very EDC capable size in my opinion. Here's the PM2. These two are nearly identical in size, with, I believe, the PM2 coming in slightly bigger, as you guys can see there. So pretty nifty stuff. This is the Knife Center exclusive with the Flytanium Lava Fat Carbon. Very nifty stuff. And then a knife that also kind of has a lot of similarity in the fact that it has a very EDC capable blade shape. Ignore the fact that I have a giant scratch on my knuckle. I'm a boxer. I train, so that's just kind of, it happens. But there you guys are there. That is the ZT0562. I just recently reviewed that one. But these two are very EDC blade shapes. I find that the slicer blade shape from Hinderer and this Doug Ritter blade shape perform very similarly. So there you guys are there. I think one or two, excuse me, little other knives I want to show are my other, what are they called? My other OG GOAT knives, which includes the Hogue Deca, which this guy's quite a bit bigger than. And of course, my casual kind of size comparison that I always use, the AD 20.5. This one is still to this day my favorite, but I don't know, these Doug Ritter scales are pretty great, fully contoured and really lovely. So there you guys are. And then before I get started with the review, be looking out for the Kershaw Bel Air XL review that'll be coming soon. I just recently reviewed the clip point variation, so I just wanted to give you guys a little heads up that that review will be coming soon. Anyways, that was a lot of size comparisons. I know I do a lot of size comparisons, but I just really want you guys to know how big these knives are in comparison to some of your all-time popular knives. But anyways, moving forward, I want to now discuss what I like and don't like about this knife and if I can recommend it for you guys. Now, I am going to touch on the scales a little bit, but this obviously is not a video about the scales. It's a video about the knife. So moving forward, here we go. I'm also going to give you guys a recommendation for this knife, if I can recommend it or not, and of course the overall rating that I want to give it there at the end. On to the review. So first and foremost, I love this blade shape. I do know that they did this blade shape on a couple of Griptilians, as I said before, but I gotta be honest with you, with a slightly bigger handle and a much fuller grip, especially with this guy being in G10 too, it's just a much more comfortable knife. And this blade shape really fits at home with a bigger handle. It really would feel out of place for me on a Griptilian, but on this knife, it's just perfect. I mean, the handle basically looks like a Griptilian handle, except it's got kind of a secondary hump here, which is very nice and very welcomed and is something that I like. I don't want to get to the handle too soon. We still gotta do the blade. But I love the blade shape overall. It's extremely slicey. It's a full flat. It's a very deep ride, full flat grind with a very nice 20 CV steel use and a very nice stonewash. I think everything about this blade is just flawless. Most people would say that this is the most EDC capable blade shape. And I'm going to be one of those people that say it absolutely is. Again, it very much so compares to the 0562, which I've used and thought that it was the greatest blade shape of all time. And then I found this guy. It's just so much more slicey, comes down to a much thinner edge, and it's much thinner behind the edge because it's not a ZT. But Doug Ritter did a great job on designing this blade. I think it's just out of this world. It also helps that it's made by Hogue. I think Hogue does some of the best machine work for blades that I've seen in a long time. I've been looking at getting their Misto. They have a lot of cool colorways and options that are now coming out for that knife, and I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. But they do just excellent machine work on this blade, and this is just incredibly nice, incredibly nice. Moving on, it is USA made. That is something I absolutely adore, and the thumb studs are something I absolutely adore. I know a lot of people complain about these thumb studs as being kind of overly aggressive, but I am not a baby, and my thumbs are fully calloused from both opening knives, working construction, guitar playing, etc. I just have very calloused thumb, top of thumb. How do you say that? Tip of thumb. The tip of my thumb is very calloused, but it doesn't really hurt my thumb. You know, maybe if I'm opening it a billion times, it would eventually, but I love it. I love that it's textured like that. It makes it so even when I'm in gloves, even when my hands are wet, I can get this knife open. In comparison to the Griptilian, which has fully rounded thumb studs, I just don't necessarily feel like those are the best thumb studs, especially in compared to these guys. So there you go. Moving down, they also put that same texture on the crossbar. So of course I like that too. I very much so enjoyed it. It's something I talked about when I reviewed the Deco, which I might be reviewing soon, like re-reviewing soon. But yeah, I love this texturing that they did there. I also love that the hardware is all T8, except the pivot, which I believe is a T10. Or is it also T8? I am pretty positive it's T10, but the rest of the body screws are all T8. You guys, that is incredible. We need more of that in the knife world. It is just a great thing. I love that this knife does come stock with G10 as well. These are not the most attractive G10 scales, the Jade specifically, but you guys can see they're very well textured, and I will say, even though I did switch them out, these handles had not much wrong with them. There were a couple issues that I'll mention later, but in terms of the contoured feel, the overall aesthetic of them, they really weren't bad. I quite enjoyed them. And again, it's G10. I'm glad they didn't decide to go with polymer and just cut the cost to all hell. This was nice. I appreciate the contour G10, etc., etc. I keep rambling a bit, but I just love the scales. I think they did a great job, and I'm glad that they decided to make G10 the stock of what they were going to do with this guy. It made the most sense with the 20 CV. I will say this guy comes out in a multitude of colorways, which I think is excellent. I love when companies do that. I think that is something that should be prevalent with most knives that use G10. I also love that they have diversified in steels and also in the fact that you can get an automatic now. Having a lot of flavors of one knife is an awesome thing to do, because that means that you can collect versions of this knife. You're not limited to just one version of this knife. If you just want one version, you can pick your preferred, pick your poison, if you will. But if you wanted a version of this that was manual, a version that was automatic, a version that had purple and black G-Mascus, or if you wanted a version that was just in black G10 or orange G10, whatever, you have that option, and I think that's extremely cool. I also will say I do like the aesthetic to some degree. I think it is a little more utilitarian in its aesthetic, but I do think it still carries quite the aesthetic. Most of those handle ways are also pretty beautiful. I do enjoy a lot of them, especially the G-Mascus variations. And of course, the OG goat scales just make this knife go from like 10 out of 10 to 12 out of 12. So there you go. Moving down to the pocket clip, it is one of the best deep carry pocket clips because it's not super heavy in its retention. And, you know, it's got a big enough hump that the non-recessed screws don't really become a problem. I do also like that it is flow through. With a lot of Axis style locks, I prefer flow through because Axis locks and the Omega springs specifically do need to get oiled pretty regularly to make sure that they will last a long time. So that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. This guy's going to be extremely easy to clean. I will say the final thing and the big thing that I want to mention with this knife is that it is a knife that is built for one purpose. It is built to be a tool. That is something I do enjoy, especially because they made it so smooth, so fidgety. Yet it's a tool. It's very clearly a tool. It's designed to be a tool and be used. I'm not saying that there are a lot of knives out there that aren't meant to be used. Obviously, most knives are, but there are certain knives that are meant to more be looked at as an aesthetic piece or as a collector's piece, but this is not that kind of knife. It is built for one purpose, and it'll use and abuse that purpose to all hell if you allow it to. So that is quite an awesome thing. It's something that I very much so appreciate with Hogue and a lot of their knives. They're utilitarian not only in birth, but also just in general, right? Just in every aspect you can think, it is a tool that is supposed to be used and cut on a daily basis. That is an awesome, awesome, awesome thing. I love the retention on the Omega springs for this guy. I don't know why I am messing up. I'm currently behind a camera, so it kind of hurts to do that, but I will say the retention on it, it's slightly, not slightly, it's quite a bit harder than Benchmade's. It's actually probably the hardest Omega springs I've ever felt, but I love that. It makes it just feel so much more robust, and when that flick happens, it makes a really nice sound. It is very acoustic in a lot of ways, and I love that to death. Now, going back, I love that the handles are fully contoured. That's a great thing. The ergonomics are incredible. I've already mentioned that, but it doesn't hurt to mention it twice. But I think that's going to be it for me. I think that was a very, very quick what I like about the knife. I feel like I usually ramble in that segment, and I am right now. So let's keep moving forward. Let's talk about what I don't like about this knife. And there's not a lot, you guys. There really isn't with this. I know I always say that, but in this case, it really isn't a lot. The first is going to be the non-recessed screws and the coated clip. I do wish that I didn't get a coated clip. I think there are some versions of this that don't have one. And I don't love that they smacked DR Hogue on that either. It's just a little unnecessary, but overall the clip is still great. So realistically, I'm just nitpicking here, right? It's not massive issues. It's just slight holes in what I think the pocket clip could make it, you know, again, 10 out of 10 to just being an 11 to 12 out of 10, right? It's just taking something that's already pretty much perfect and just making it even more so, which you'd think wouldn't be possible, but of course I'm an idiot and I believe in fallacies. Moving on, I don't love these old scales, right? I like them quite a bit, and I might have said before that I love them because, again, fallacies, but the texturing here just gets a bit annoying. Now, this right here is where the pocket clip would ride if this guy had a pocket clip on. This is the most textured part of the handle, and it is the part of the handle that I wish wasn't textured because it's where, if I were to hold this guy like so, it's where my middle finger, which is the finger that I bog down the hardest outside of my index, it's the finger I bog down the hardest on. So obviously being on this heavily textured space, it just doesn't feel great. Again, I was just commenting on how I don't have sensitive hands about the thumb studs. Here I am contradicting myself for like the third time, but this guy is just a little too textured for my liking. It just gets annoying, right? It doesn't hurt, it just gets annoying. And I will say, again, with the pocket clip riding right there, it was tearing up my jeans pretty rough. And I will say the JG10, although not too ugly in my opinion, I do wish that they came, or that I got mine in a different colorway, or maybe even dyed these scales. It's the one reason I recommend JG10 is if you're looking to dye some scales, but I wasn't. So, of course, I just kind of had to live with the jade. And although I could see the Omega Springs, see if there was ever an issue, it just wasn't my absolute favorite aesthetic ever. At least if this guy had a coated blade, maybe I'd be a little more excited about it. I love the JG10 with coated blades, but when it's a silver blade, it just didn't look as aesthetic as I was hoping for. Moving on, I will say this is the only knife from Hogue, the only one out of the 4 that I own that has some pretty bad Omega Springs in terms of the stock Omega Springs. The reason I say they were bad is because both of them broke on me. Not just one side broke, and then about 2 to 3 months later, the other side broke. I did replace them every single time. I re-oiled them as consistently as I could, but I do live in a bit of a humid environment, and I was carrying this guy kind of a lot over the summer. And I think this guy just ended up kind of drying out the Omega Springs or something, because they ended up snapping. But luckily, I will say this is a very good for Hogue. Their warranty department is probably the best of any warranty department I've ever talked to, right? They're super nice. They're super welcoming. They want to hear you out on the problem, and they're going to fix your knife, 0 questions asked, right? They want to make sure that their quality assurance is up to par, but they also want you to know that no matter how much you were jackassing with your knife, they're going to help you out, especially when it comes to the Omega Springs. So that is awesome. They also sent me an extra pocket clip with both Omega Springs that I got. So they had replacement pocket clips ready for me, even though I didn't ask for them. So that's awesome. You can always use more pocket clips. You never know if you're going to get it caught on a seat or something and end up getting it pulled or whatever and then deforming. So having extra ones on standby is incredibly nice and incredibly generous for absolutely free, which they replaced the Omega Springs for absolutely free too. They just sent them to my house, and I just took it apart and managed to replace them all the same. So that is awesome, but unfortunately with the Omega Springs snapping, I've had a couple Benchmates have Omega Springs break and things like that. So this isn't unfamiliar for me, but it just kind of sucks. I wasn't expecting it from Hogue because I just felt like their Axis style lock was just significantly better. I believe it's called the Able lock, by the way. I keep calling it the Axis style, but I'm going to try to start calling it a crossbar style because it's not an Axis lock. It's its own thing, right? Kinda. But anyways, the last thing I will say is this guy is a bit on the heavy side, right? It's not using polymer, so it's going to be heavier, even with the G10 scales. Adding aluminum to that, of course, that's just going to make it slightly heavier. But OG Goat did a great job in milling out most of this handle, making it pretty light. And as you guys can see here, Hogue did not do a lot of milling, right? They milled out kind of right through here, and that's pretty much all they did. All down here is just that thick, this is the thickest part of the G10 anyways, is not milled out at all. So you can definitely, again, feel there's a bit of heft to not only those G10, but now also to the aluminum. This knife is just kind of a heavier knife. I love the weight, but it's something I want you guys to know. It is a bit on the heavier side, similar to how the like Mini Adamas is a little heavy, similar to how the H&K Exemplar is a little bit heavy. Like it's not super bad, but it's something worth note. I'd say the weight's pretty similar to like a PM2. So there's that for you guys. I think that's gonna do it. That was a quick one, I feel like. But yeah, you guys, I can absolutely recommend this knife. It is $170, $180. That's great. That's a great price for this guy. It does suck that it is a KnifeWorks exclusive, but I love KnifeWorks. I buy knives through them anyways and a lot of parts through them anyways, so it doesn't really faze me. But this guy's cost, this guy's material, this guy's overall execution is really well done. Really, really well done. Hogue, Doug Ritter. Love Doug Ritter, by the way. I want to go back just a little bit. That's something I love. Doug Ritter is a great, great part of the knife community. He is someone who has fought tooth and nail for knife rights. So he's a great guy and a great designer, and he works very nicely with the knife community. So great, great there. But yeah, I can recommend this to you guys over pretty much any knife in its size class, in its weight class, in its kind of overall class of tool, right? I would definitely recommend this over the 0562. I'd recommend it over the Griptilian. I'm not going to say I recommend it over the PM2 because I am a PM2 fanboy through and through. It is one of the greatest knives of all time, but this knife is pretty darn close. Pretty darn close. I would put it over most of what Benchmade offers, And I would even put it over most of what Hogue themselves offers. I just think that this knife is a gold standard knife. And with that, the rating is a 9.8 out of 10. That is a high rating. That is the highest rating I think I've given out yet. But you guys, this knife is so close to perfect. If these scales were just maybe smoothed out a little bit more, it would be a 10. But unfortunately, they were not as great as I was hoping, even though they were still good. So there you guys go. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Be expecting the Kershaw review coming soon, the Bel Air. And with that, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and thank you.